Hello. Welcome, everyone, to the 2021 Virtual Compassion in Action Healthcare Conference. I am Michael Goldberg, Scholar in Residence at the Schwartz Center. Thank you for joining us for today's workshop, a prosocial staff leadership model based on courage and compassion. Please join me in welcoming our presenter. Matthew Loscalzo is a Lillian Elkins Professor in Supportive Care Programs and Professor for the Department of Population Sciences, the Administrative Director of the Sherry and Les Biller Patient and Family Resource Center, and the Executive Director in the Department of Supportive Care Medicine for City of Hope in California. Matthew, we are happy to have you with us today. And on a personal note, I'm looking forward to hearing about your work. Thank you.
Dr. Michael Goldberg, thank you for that lovely introduction. It is an honor to be here. Before I officially start, I want to thank the Schwartz Center, Schwartz Rounds. You have had a major impact in every setting where I have worked over these years. And we're very fortunate to begin to really think hard about not only who we are in healthcare, but who do we want to be. And so what I'd like to talk about today is this model that absolutely is a work in progress. And as we talk together, all of us, this is a conversation we're going to be having through the slides, through the chat. And again, I want to thank Dr. Michael Goldberg for being so willing to people the chat and to pull out some of the themes. And you'll see I'm serious about this being a conversation, not a lecture. We've had as many of those as we need. We need to learn how to talk to each other better. And that's in large part when we're talking about courage, compassion, communication. Let's put that into practice. So I really appreciate being able to have this time. And I welcome people to chat up the chat, really get going, and don't let me get away with anything that doesn't make sense or that you feel just doesn't feel right. So again, thank you for having me. I do want to start with the essence of the staff leadership model. It has been a work in really progress for about 35 years. And the major issue about staff leadership, we began years ago thinking that it was leading from any chair. But in point of fact, staff leadership is leading from every chair. And I'm going to share some very specific ways that staff leadership happens that are very practical. But I also know that I have to talk with you about where we came from and where we are now, and a bit about where we are headed. So when we talk about staff leadership leading from every chair, we literally mean that, from the administrative assistant, to the physicians, to the nurses, to the chaplains, to the social workers, to the mental health professionals, to the whole team. And I will talk a bit about what that looks like in practice, so you can take some of these ideas home if you find them to be of help. So in 2007, I was recruited to help build an integrated interdisciplinary program at City of Hope, which is right outside of Pasadena, California. It's a comprehensive cancer center. We started with about 25 staff, full-time staff. They were all in different divisions. And now in 2021, we have over 150 full-time staff. Again, it's an integrated interdisciplinary department. That's different than a multidisciplinary department. So if you want to have a picture of what do we look like, the Department of Supportive Care Medicine, we created this vision as a team, came from the staff. to be the best program of supportive care medicine in the world. Not the biggest, but the best. And so we have an integrated interdisciplinary program that is everything from nurses to anesthesiologists doing interventional pain. We have an inpatient service called the Integrated Care Service, palliative medicine. We have all the mental health specialties, as well as technologies that we have developed here and have licensed to others. So it really is a robust team. And so what we feel makes us special is our unique staff leadership model. We have had and continue to be in the top 5% in the institution in our engagement scores with Press Ganey and prior to Press Ganey getting here. And we are higher than the national average in every engagement score. We've raised about $28 million over the 14 years. We have an endowment for sustainment and growth of about $15 million, about $14 million in grant funding. And as I said, we're very proud that we have an integrated interdisciplinary program where we are accountable to each other. And so all of that would be nice, and then the business people are going to say appropriately, but what does it mean on the bottom line? And everywhere in the country, healthcare is struggling with the bottom line, and we know that. So we had Accenture come in, and they looked at our program, the supportive care program, and what they found is exactly what many of you know. If you provide supportive care early on, it has a massive difference. If you wait until the end, of course, the sort of changes are going to be much smaller. Because we need to be having conversations with patients and families about their mental and physical health from day one. And generally that starts with screening, biopsychosocial screening. So if you look at this slide, the first red box on your upper right, if you look at supportive care getting involved early, the time in the intensive care unit is 5.1 days. If you look at supportive care not being there, it's double that almost. And if we look at the cost, if we break that down into dollars and cents, which is what we are often asked to do, and you are also, over 3 years, we saved a combined about $29 million. That's $29 million. Now, the humanistic side of this, which is the side that we all care about, and we all care about keeping the lights on, but we run into this business to help people. And if you look at the humanistic side, we know 20 to 25% of family members whose loved ones died in the intensive care unit 5 years later still report post-traumatic stress type symptoms. Not full PTSD, some of them do, but there's a human cost, there's a financial cost to doing what we do. So keep doing what you do. So let's chat already. What do you personally value most from your team? So I'm going to ask you to start to enter that into the chat as I tell you the story that I shared with Dr. Goldberg a few minutes ago. In the early 80s, I had the pleasure to work with some of the smartest, brightest people in the world, and I still do. And in a hallway conversation with my hero, who's a very famous person, he said to me, I give every drop of what I have to my patients. I don't have anything left for staff. They have to do that on their own. And that conversation changed my life because it made me realize that if we as professionals are not supporting each other, if we're not lifting each other up, if we're not recognizing the separation from family and work is illusory, if we're not doing that, how can we be taking really good care of patients and families? And you know, the data shows that when you have a team, safety goes up, efficiency goes up, and humanity goes up. So I'm going to ask my partner, Dr. Michael Goldberg, to give me a sense of what's going on in the chat, Michael.
Well, there were a lot of things that it was hard to keep up, but they talk about caring, support, empathy, cohesiveness, a kind of vision, seeing people as their authentic selves, connection, seeing and respecting each other, willingness to collaborate. And it is interesting that if I did not know you asked this question about what do you see in your teammate, this is the same list that patients want to be seen in their physician. So is that what you expected when you asked this question?
So as we hear, thank you, Michael, so very much. Isn't that the conversation? We know our social environments have profound effects on us. This is research, this is data. And when we hear these adjectives about who we aspire to be and want to be, I don't believe we can create that environment for patients in any depth unless we create that environment for each other. And we can do that. If those of us in healthcare do not take this on, who is going to do it? It's going to be us, or it's not going to be done. So why don't we go to, thank you, Michael. And I'm going to assume that it was a lot to take in, is that I'm talking too fast. That's my New York Bronx accent and speed you both have to deal with, although I've been in California for almost 20 years now. So if I'm going too fast, stop me. I'm a man who needs to be stopped. It's okay. So let me ask you this question. And this comes right out of the chat, if you think about it. My coworkers and I are most like a football team, an orchestra, a political party, a cult, a family, a clique, or a clique, a platoon, a gang, or other. And if you say other, put it in the chat. We want to hear from you. We want to hear what you're thinking. Because this is a big issue. This is a really big challenge. We can see the numbers coming in now. Can you see these numbers, Michael?
Yes. Okay. And can you see them as well?
Yes, I can, which is great. Thank you, Jen. This helps a great deal because we're going to talk a little bit about this. And I'm going to lose.
How are you?
Okay, I think we're just about there. There are still some people checking in. We have about 44 of about 59 people. Let's wait a few seconds. Hearing what you think really matters. We so seldom get to have conversations like this. Today we're going to have one. Okay, we're getting closer. And Michael, as you know, I've invited you to join me in all and any aspects of this talk. It is not every day that I get to see a pediatric orthopedic surgeon running a chat for a social worker. So I really want to thank you, Michael.
Yes. So you can see what came out on here as a orchestra or a family. The chat only mentioned those who are related and closer to our age, so that team most reminded them of Gilligan's Island. But to go on to how is this interpreted?
Okay, this is fantastic. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for the data. Thank you for entering this data. Now, just think about it. I'm going to just focus on two of these for right now. And let me tell you why we are not a family. We are not a family because we are hired. We are not a family because there are expectations. And we are not a family because our bosses are not going to love us no matter what we do. The other problem with family, and it's a massive problem for team building, is that we may feel like a family, we may act like a family, but we cannot confuse the analogy with the metaphor. The metaphor is that we're going to be accepting and be loving no matter what. That's what a family does, or some families. But if you consider yourself a family, the problem is you expect your colleagues to treat you as if you were in your original family. We all have stories about our families. Some of them are wonderful, some of them are good. But many of us come from families that were deeply troubled. And we cannot expect our colleagues to be our family members. It's just really illusory. It's not realistic. It's not honest. And so when I go to do a consultation, one of the first things I ask is, tell me about your team. Tell me about your conflicts. Think about all the old stories that we have from families, from our own families, right? And if we bring these old stories and interpret and judge our colleagues based on our families, think about everyone comes with a history of a family. It's not functional. Having old stories being played out in high stress environments where we all work is really disruptive to building teams. And I know for some people it's hard to feel that. It's hard to hear that. But institutions cannot love you back. Your team members can support you and often love you, but that's different. Okay, so I'm going to offer, and our team thinks like this, that we're probably more like an orchestra. That we play together as a team. We have each other's backs, but when one of us takes a solo, we got their backs. We're supporting them. We're behind them. And we also care enough to be courageous, to say, are you open to some feedback about how you can help us better and how you can grow? And if the person says yes, they're going to get feedback, not only about what they could do to grow better, to be more proud of themselves, but also what they're doing really, really well. And that's what an orchestra does. We're together when we play, and then we give each other solos and pats on the back. So is there anything in the chat, Michael, that I should actually know about? Is there anyone who's really upset about what I've said?
Only that there has been that in some organizations, chaplains do use the term family when referring to what the team ought to consider. And that was I make note of that.
Well, I'm not here to proselytize anything other than to say, think about the implications for the model that you have in your mind. Think about the implications for what it means. And are we creating environments which are honest and open? And so just think through about what are the pros and cons of really any of these options. But I think you need to be aware and conscious of the models you are building. And this is the model that my team and I built over years. And we're not saying it is the only model. We are not saying it is the model that you should use. We're just sharing a model because we love to learn back and forth, and we love critique everything. So we're going to move on to the next slide. From now on, we're not a family, we're a coalition. So what happens when teams don't work right? How do you know? Well, I know when a team's not working right when I travel and meet with teams and with leadership, because I say to them, tell me about your conflicts. And if a team cannot tell you about their conflicts mean energy, caring, excitement. Conflicts are not a problem. Not managing and using conflicts to move forward, that's a problem. So if the environment is unhealthy or unhealing, how can we make them healing and healthy? Well, first of all, let's be honest about the environments in which we work. These are hot zones, unrelenting demands. I don't know about you. Do any of you feel that you're overstaffed at work? Do any of you feel you don't have as much work to keep you busy? Well, these are unrelenting demands, emotionally charged, really sick people confronting life and death issues. Most people don't live in the hot zone. We live there every day. There are also a lot of inefficiencies and silos, mistrust, and so the rolling of the eyes and demonizing people. Often that happens because the stakes are so high and people are so stressed and there's so much work. I'm trying to have an honest conversation with you here. So if your setting isn't like this, then you're very fortunate. Physicians, scientists, business people, nurses, chaplains, they're not groomed to be team players. I've been doing this for 41 years. I haven't seen it anywhere. We all share the same humanistic values. But for some people, being deeply honest, being deeply open, having emotions Having deep relationships at work can be threatening to them. A few colleagues and I, and Michael, you'll be happy that you're all from Boston. Marshall Forstein and Susan Block and I are writing a book about loss in healthcare professionals. It's about half done. We are all struck, and the other 10 authors are struck by the irony of loneliness by being surrounded by caring professionals. Our colleagues suffer, and yet we do not make space for them to share that suffering so we can lift them up in that suffering, to connect with the sadness, to bring out the healthiest parts of us, because the energy is not going into hiding, it's going into healing. And another thing that we need to talk about is the tolerance for bad behavior, what I call cascade iatrogenesis. That there are colleagues who we work with who get away with behaviors that are just not acceptable. And yet we have no language and no mechanism to address those. I think we need the language. I think we need to talk about it. You get the sense of this. This is not acceptable. Rolling of eyes behind colleagues' backs, talking behind colleagues, undermining colleagues. It happens everywhere. It's not acceptable, but it will not stop until we can have conversations like this. And this is something that Schwartz Rounds has really, really brought to our heads and our hearts. And I want to thank all of you for really doing that. Because of time, I'm only going to talk about this slide as a colleague, because the colleague is who we want to be. A colleague tolerates short-term angst and discomfort. It doesn't feel good for long-term benefits, because not feeling good or not feeling comfortable is not an excuse. We are expected to be compassionate and courageous in our interactions with patients and families, and why not our colleagues? We need to reflect on what is happening in the moment and beyond, giving our colleagues feedback that helps them to grow and to recognize the good that they do when they're doing it. Colleagues have the best interest of others at heart in relation to their deeply held values. Colleagues consciously support the healthiest parts of people. The less healthiest part are on the left side of that screen, which I don't really have time to go through. But you know what I'm talking about. You see it every day. Colleagues consciously support the healthiest parts of each other. And I think that's probably and I know that I read it twice. It's not just my age why I'm saying it twice, because I think it's what drives us to be better, to heal each other and to lift each other up. Deciding I'm going to connect with the healthiest part of that person. Do you know when you just rolled your eyes at our colleague, you just asked me to join you and collude with you against my colleague and the department. Please don't do that again. I'm asking you as a colleague to bring out the best in each other. Having the language makes it possible, not easy. You still need the courage. We need colleagues who think about the impact on the larger group. We're very social, we human beings, and we respond to the other person's virtues and values, but they should be made conscious. And then, of course, thinking about the personal and long-term gain to self and the program based on honesty and compassion. And how do I get to be my best self? How do I know when I meet with a person who tends to touch my buttons that this time it's going to be different? I'm only going to reach out to the best side of them so I can be the best side of me. Michael, are the chats okay? Some of this is very provocative and I understand it. And I stand by it. Because everything on here that makes sense and that is logical has come from the team. And I'm proud to represent them.
The chat is in agreement with you. Even as I read through them, one of the most common themes that comes up is the importance of trust, candidness, the psychological safety. And so how does that environment develop?
You know what, Michael? Whoever put that chat in there, whoever said that, I want to thank you because we're going to get to those slides very shortly. So thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael, for helping. Please cut in anytime, Michael. Okay, let's do a poll and let's get to some of the work here. Live poll. What do you see as the 2 top obstacles to your team reaching its full potential? I don't want philosophizing. I want your personal experiences. What do you see as the 2 top obstacles to your team reaching its full potential? These are the kinds of conversations that the chat is asking for. How do we get there? What do we do? Well, the first thing we ask is, what's getting in the way? We're all decent people in healthcare. We didn't get here by accident. We want to help people. We care about human beings. Right? We want to do the right thing. But there are barriers, and let's be honest what they are. If it's on your mind, it's on the table. Okay, we're a bit more than halfway there. This is fantastic data. This is really helpful. And this is what we find in virtually every place where we do a consultation for staff leadership. And these numbers are aligning with some of the finest places in the country and some of the smallest. Okay, we should probably look at the numbers now. Michael, does anything jump out at you?
Well, I think to me, the harm of having a organizational hierarchy, a team hierarchy, some of the time-honored traditions in care, captain of the ship, and other things that do not lend itself to what I hear you're saying.
Absolutely. So I want to take one of the smaller ones first, if that's okay. And one of the smaller ones is fear of hurting the feelings of others. This one comes up a lot. And I do believe that people do want to keep the social setting calm, do want to work as a team. They see fear of hurting other people's feelings. And if that's the goal, that's not what we are talking about. But you also have to ask yourself the question, okay, is the other person so fragile that they cannot hear how they can be a better person and grow and get closer to the team? Or is it that you're so uncomfortable because you don't have the language to share information in a way that will make that person grow and be better? So you have to ask yourself, do I have the compassion and the courage to help someone else? And you have to be honest with yourself to know. When I look at this data, the power hierarchy does not permit honest communication. That is the number one reason that people give. But in your team, you can have conversations like this. And if you know over a long period of time you cannot, you really have to think about, is this damaging my mental health? You want to be in an environment where people support you. The power hierarchy should be begging you to help them make the system better, right? Your team members should be begging you to say, let's be honest and open. I have family, I have kids, I have elderly parents, I have challenges. Let's talk about how we can support each other so we can be courageous and trusting and fair. And I would say the 2 biggest barriers are power hierarchy, not role modeling, honest, open communication in which you ask in open meetings for critique about what we could be doing better, ongoing. The good things we are doing, the things we can do better, you have to do both, and no process in place. In the department that I am in, I could tell you which divisions create the space for positive feedback and for growth feedback, and which ones don't. Because when you have a conversation with them, there's a level of disconnection. And I can look at how long people stay and go based on those 2 things. Carving out of time to keep each other healthy. We have an obligation to each other and to patients to do that. Okay, before we move on, Is there anything in the chat, Michael, that we should look at, or
Only
yeah.
To bring up that there were several comments about hierarchy. Deborah said that hierarchy leads to concrete thinking and blocks the initiative. And it was another comment was referring to different levels of maturity on a team, which might be interpreted as a difference in life experience, but also echoes what you pointed out about the importance of mentoring.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And that's why it takes time to create this. But I would argue you'll spend a lot less time hiring new people. You'll spend a lot less time in underlying smoldering conflict and much more time in supporting and celebrating each other. And I'm going to share with you now some ways that you could do that. Okay, this is what Schwartz is all about. This is what we're all about, relationship-centered care. Relationship-centered care emphasizes that clinicians ought to listen, respect colleagues, appreciate the contributions that colleagues bring from other disciplines, promote sincere teamwork, that's the trust coming back, bridge differences, and learn from and celebrate the accomplishments of their colleagues. If we cannot talk about generational differences in our teams, if we cannot talk about racial differences in our teams, right? If we cannot talk about gender differences in our teams, if we cannot talk about those very essences of what makes us human beings, we lose all that diversity of creativity and passion and trust. And that can only happen if we create environments where we have the language and the infrastructure to talk to each other. But you cannot wait for leadership to do that. You start it with one other colleague, two other colleagues, three other colleagues, and it's infectious. Mental health is infectious. Doing the right thing is infectious. So the staff leadership model defined finally is a programmatic approach in which every team member is expected to be a leader. What does that mean? That means that they have an obligation to openly question and challenge everything in a respectful, compassionate way, and being personally accountable to making the best program in the world they can by being the best person that they can. Because especially for leaders, you cannot know what kind of leader you're going to be until you decide what kind of person you want to be. And the person you are at this moment or 20 seconds ago is irrelevant. Start acting this moment to whom you want to be, to who you aspire to be, to the hero in your mind who you pull in, whoever she or he is, to say, I want to be more like that person and that person over there, and all the different sub-selves within yourself you have can make a conscious choice over which sub-self comes forward on your team. The core value is to provide the same level of compassion and expertise to patients as to colleagues. My first week here, which was 14 and a half years ago, and I'm about 2.5 weeks to going into semi-retirement. My first week here, I said to the team of about 25 people, who's most important? And they all said patients. And I said, we have a ways to go. You are most important. Because if you're not functioning as a team, if you're not trusting each other, if you're not supporting each other, how can you take care of patients in a safe way? So we have got to really have honest conversations, but you can't do that without the infrastructure and the language. So the basic tenets of staff leadership model, all colleagues are smart. They are just smart. You don't get to a hospital by not being smart. There's no shortage of really smart people in hospitals. People are adaptable when given some control over their change. And this is what a leader should not sound like. I want you to start doing this, and I want you to do it like this, and I want you to show up at this time and to leave at this time. That's not a leader, okay? That's a manager. And there's nothing wrong with managers, but they're not leaders. A leader comes in and she or he says, we have this challenge. And this is where we have to get to. Let's talk about how we can get there. Because leaders who always say we don't have time to talk, they're often the same leaders who created that crisis. And we have to have conversations that are this honest and this open. We need to engage the people on the front line to teach us about their jobs, rather than leaders going in to teach them about their jobs. So we're more likely to act in the best interest of each other if we ask each other, how do I get the best out of you? You know, we've been talking, and sometimes I don't get a sense that we click. And I don't care if it's logical or illogical. Let's talk about it. We're all here to do the same thing. I need to grow, you need to grow, let's do it together. Influencing specific behaviors are more realistic than changing people. So for those of you who have that extra control gene, you're going to be very frustrated in this life. We can influence behaviors of people and how we interact, but changing them is another story. And in any relationship, when one person wins over the other, the relationship loses. We have to meet in a place based on virtues and values. And that sometimes means we don't back down. Leaders' primary function is to aspire to inspire each other. And on our team, the staff leadership model says we're all leaders. So we're here to aspire to inspire each other. So let's go to a poll and then we'll go to the chat if that's okay, Michael.
Sure.
How much influence do you have in decisions that impact your department or division? You personally, how much influence do you have in decisions that impact your department or your division? Take your time. We're not going to rush. But just look at these numbers bouncing up and down. I hope that everyone can see these. But it's fascinating to watch it come in. We have about 50 of about 64 people. And we are getting there, almost 80%. And this is an essential question for mental and physical health. Those people who feel they have some influence over their environment are less stressed and are healthier. Why is it that the poorest people in our society are the sickest? Why is it that we know that poverty is a carcinogen? Because those are the people who have the least influence over their lives. And in our experiences and in the data, being able to influence what's going on, to control essential things in your life are major implications for physical and mental health. So let's look at the numbers. Michael, what jumps out at you?
Well, I am, it's where I have worked in the hospitals on the front lines that there were many people here who more than half the group had pretty influential, very influential, and extremely influential. And at least from my frontline experience, I am more with some, but not very much. And so I'm curious from our participants, are you leaders of very small departments? Are you, has the work of recognizing collaboration been part of your organization? And perhaps you might respond while Matthew comments about the poll.
Yeah, I love that idea. So please chat it up. For those people who feel, as Michael said, for those people who have a lot of influence, feel that, which is, this is a different kind of a group. And I've asked this question in the past that most people say some, but not much. So you folks must come from really great and interesting places. So please drop it in the chat so we can know what has personally made you feel. No philosophizing, please. You personally, this is a one-to-one conversation that we're having with this team here, right? What are the specific behaviors that were manifested that made you feel pretty influential, very influential, extremely influential. Let's learn from each other. Start to dump that in the chat, and then Michael can put them into themes like he's been doing beautifully.
And there was another question that came up while this was going on, and that is, note was made that there were some leaders who feared loss of control, who lacked maturity. And the question that might arise is that how do we show compassion towards our leaders so that they could come along with the work that you're talking about the front line doing? So if we're all taking care of each other, how do we take care of our leaders? Or
yes. This is these questions are just so filled with meaning and depth. If you want to engage your leaders, you need to have compassion. Demonizing your leaders is a lose-lose for everyone. Remember, in any relationship, if one person wins over the other, the relationship loses. People come into healthcare regardless of where they are. They want to help. And we want to reach out to the healthiest part of them. They also have really, really hard jobs with incredible demands on them coming from multiple places with everything changing every day. Without compassion, there's no connection. You've got to connect, correct, and align, and then commit to moving forward. Connect, correct, commit. So we've got to have compassion for all of us. And they're all good people trying to do a decent job. And if you come to all of the team from that perspective, you're more likely to find something better. And then there were those times, like I had about a year ago, when a person said, I want this department to do X, Y, and Z. And they brought my boss in the room to sort of intimidate me. And I said to them, it would really be more helpful if you tell me what you're trying to achieve. And because if you tell me what you're trying to achieve, we're more likely to get deeper and to do more. And we agreed on that. Because it's reasonable. But if you get your team talking first, when you build out to your leadership, they'll hear you differently. Because you would have spoken with your team members and gotten the language down right. But you got to be compassionate. You got to realize that in our core, people in healthcare are good people. So I hope that was helpful, Michael.
Yeah. And in response to the other questions, a number of people have made note that they are in organizations that are becoming, the highest leaders are becoming reflective of what is needed. They are looking at being a highly reliable organization. They are recognizing that you have to make values that are visible. You have to live the values, that there has to be accountability to values. So I am, it sounds as if many of the people who are here are in organizations where leadership had made it fertile to do the work you describe.
Sure. And people who attend Schwartz rounds, I think overall across the country, they are not the typical folks who, these are people who are thoughtful and who make sure that they make time to hear these talks, to make time to give these talks, to make time to give the thought, to create the language that needs to be done. I don't believe there's ever been a better time to make healthcare healthier than there is now. Just by the gender changes, women tend to be more tuned in to humanistic values. The male military model of healthcare is ancient. It's not working. All the generational differences, all the veil being lifted up about racism and sexism and poverty created by the COVID pandemic that we're still really coping with. These are terrible things, but they're also opportunities. And for groups like this, it's going to come from groups like this. This is where the change is going to come from. So yes, this is probably not a very typical group, Michael.
So
So what is a commitment to staff leadership? Because I've been asked about the infrastructure. Well, you have to have an infrastructure. And that is, if your boss if your supervisor is not, going to be able to tolerate risk-taking and no blame, no shame zones, where you say, listen, you came in and you told me that you made a mess of this. One thing you don't need is me making you feel worse. How can we learn from this together, right? One of the major things that I think that causes change is to say no secrets. There's privacy, you're having trouble with your child at home, that's private. But no secrets among team members, no blind copying. All meeting minutes are shared so everyone can see them. If you're talking about individuals, then you could take that out of the minutes. But all minutes should be shared. Why would there be any minutes that can't be shared? Expectations should be verbally in writing when you're hiring. Hiring. Save yourself headaches. Okay, save yourself headaches, hire properly. Do not be stampeded into hiring a warm body. You want to tell people, do not come here if you do not believe in respecting everyone. And that includes administrative assistants and people who park your car. Don't come if you disrespect people. Tell them from day one, and they're more likely to grow into it, right? We respect patients, families, and our colleagues equally. You have an obligation with those fresh eyes that you're coming in with to question everything compassionately and courageously. Be honest, open, and direct in real time, preferably in front of the group. Hey, I'm working on being less irritable. If you see me be irritable, point it out, help me. I want to be a better person. Is that going to end the world? Wanting to be a better person and getting feedback from all your resources? A deep commitment to the success of each other, whether it be research and clinical care. And let's be honest with each other. There are certain professions where people are not going to be that emotionally present. We've got to respect neurological diversity. And I'm not going to pick out any group because it would be too stereotypical. But there are certain professions where they're really good at the science, but they may not be so good at engagement. Let's help them. Let's talk to them about it. We've got to respect where people come from. Also, the team should generate everything. The leaders are ultimately responsible for the strategy, for the direction, and for the hiring. But those leaders better be listening to people who are on the front lines who know that better. Whoever sweeps the floor picks the broom. So there should be a vision and a mission statement on every piece of stationery that you hand out to your team. There should be ways of working, direct honesty, no talking behind each other's backs, reaching for the healthier side, being personally accountable. Those ways of working should be on the wall so you see them every day. Staff leadership meetings should be 85% team and only 15% leadership. If you're having meetings where the leader comes in and says, I really want to hear from you, and then talks for 58 minutes, there's a message there. And the conversation has got to be, let's share information via email, if it's data, if it's where the lunchroom is, or some informational, but let's process who we're going to be together. And let's have the staff run those meetings and take turns. And a yearly retreat where we're not talking about work, we're talking about how we better support each other, and our successes should be run by the staff, by committees, who then report out to the leadership and tell them how much money they need. We run a yearly retreat for 14 years in a row until COVID, and every year they've been run by the staff, and every year they get better, and they're fantastic. Regularly scheduled deep dives. Deep dives mean, how am I doing on this team? How do you see me doing on this team? Among the teams. They should be scheduled systematically, not just created when there's a crisis. They should be focused on growth, compassion, courage, and shared wisdom. And yes, sometimes you need to tell people difficult things, and it's not all that unusual. And you know what? When they hear it from the team, and the team commits to supporting them in growing, something happens. Check-ins are more likely to be seen as ongoing processes and helpful and welcomed by colleagues. Most of our colleagues love the check-ins. And most of what they hear is positive, but quite often they hear difficult things too. And in this department, Crying is not tolerated, it's encouraged. Emotions mean you care. It means you're alive. It means you're real. So we strive to be an orchestra. The key leadership components is leading from every chair, from recruitment to orienting people, to giving them a buddy from the first day that they get on board, to orienting them to this culture that they just heard about, to accountability of each team member to be a leader, to be driven by values that we identify in all of our meetings. What value is driving this meeting? Is it financial? Is it cultural? Regularly scheduled deep dives. Our ways of working is to depersonalize. We're not a family. We feel like a family, and that's good, but we're not one. Open and honest communication, feedback in the moment, and active listening. So let's chat. What is one thing your team can be doing better? One thing. We have about 10 minutes left, and this talk is just about over, because you matter. We want to hear in the chat. So if you could enter in the chat, just one thing that your team can be doing better. Your team, not a philosophical team.
Well, while that's coming up, would you mind commenting on what is the onboarding process like at City of Hope? We hire, I love the things you said about hiring for compassion, hiring with these expectations, but now I've come to work. Tell me a little bit about from day one to getting part of my team, who does what, not to be too nitty gritty, but that's such an important transition from the hiring to being a team member.
Sure. Well, we have published in this area, and for those of you who really want to learn more about what Michael is saying, we specifically lay out how you orient. And it's the last textbook that I wrote, I got $30 for. So this is not money driven, but the textbook of psycho-oncology #4 just came out. And we have a whole chapter on how to do this. So let me answer Michael now that I made the cheap plug. Bottom line is, we start from the hiring process, orienting you to the staff leadership model. You arrive on site. On site, on day one, you meet with a team. It's the orientation team. They give you a buddy. They give you a packet with the pictures of everyone's name in it, where the restrooms are, where the cafeteria is, ways of working, what our values are, what our mission statement is, and you get a buddy for the first 30 days who can talk with you about, how do you work with this person? How do you work with this person? Is this person nice? How do I approach this? What are some of the rules around here? So you get an actual buddy. And then you start having check-ins with your team. So the process begins from the first interaction until you are firmly settled. And then you always have check-ins. At the outside, you have a quarterly check-in. Some groups have monthly check-ins. And that is, how do I see myself doing on this team? How do you see me as doing on this team? Does that help, Michael?
Yes. And during that time, we had a number of things come into the chat. And the theme of most of them was that of making space and making time to do this work, to have these meetings and to have these moments to connect, and how important it is for the organization to allow that to happen, since so many places have work from the minute you arrive to the minute one leaves. So how did the organization come to really value the time that it takes to develop the team leadership model?
Okay, thank you so much, Michael. The first week I got here, I met with HR, and they've been nothing but helpful because they value all of these things. Most human resource departments, they are often so stuck with dealing with conflicts and problems that when they hear there's a model like this, they get happy because they know there's going to be less turnover, less people out sick, less conflict. less time with actually litigation. You're going to use less time if you build an infrastructure for teamwork that is based on trust and open and honest communication. Takes much less time. Think about how much time it takes to hire people, the disruption to the staff, the frustration. So I think it takes less time. And I showed you that this model saves money. It saves a lot of money. But the bottom line is, Michael, you have nailed it. If the infrastructure isn't there, it gets harder. So you may have to start with one other person, then pull in a second person, then pull in a third person. So yeah, it does take effort, but you'd be surprised how HR, human resources, will jump up and down and be happy that you're doing this, because they know they're going to spend a lot less time hiring people, and you'll keep your best people.
So I'm sad to say that I'm receiving bulletins that we have only 2 or 3 minutes left, and so how would you like to sum up, Matthew?
Okay, well, I'm going to sum up by giving an example of what staff leadership looks like. Okay, Michael, would that be okay?
Fine.
Here's an example of what staff leadership looks like. Okay, Gloria Steinem said it best: the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. So we found this note in our restroom, which is used by both women and men, and we found this note, and we had a bunch of different responses to this note. As you can imagine, if my grandson can do it, so can you. Everyone should have to sit down. You know, this is only about men. We should find out who put this note up. These are the quotes, exact quotes, because I wrote them down when people came to get me to see this. So I took this picture. So at the next staff leadership meeting, what goes up on the board? This picture with that sound. And what happens? We learn this, and you know it, how first response is almost the worst one. Let the first response go and have compassion and courage to try to understand the other person, where they are coming from. And this is right out of Rumi in terms of us projecting and putting judgments onto others. Out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. We've got to decide to meet in that field, not in the field of high tension, high pressure, high stress, where we rough up each other. We've got to care for each other and have compassion. Here is now, this is the actual meeting. We wrote these down. This is what the staff said in open. Perhaps add a gender neutral sign, softening. Education about how this makes women feel. Who says putting down the seat is the right way? Let go of control. You don't need to control what other people do. In my culture, both men and women squat over the toilet. Use standard language. Use language such as colleagues. Focus on mutual positives. We all like dry toilets. Need to come from a place of compassion. You could feel the softness happening. All of this took 15 minutes in a department of 150 people. They all, when you get good, healthy people together, reaching for the healthy side, healthiness happens. Here's the epilogue. This is the exact restroom, actually. And this is one of our executive directors. She walks out of the room. Our NP, Carrie, walks up to her and smiling says, "Natalie, did you put up the seat?" One of the social workers walked by, starts laughing out loud because she hears this and says, and they both laugh, of course. And then she says, "Of course we can laugh about it now. We talked about it. There's nothing we can't talk about. If it's on your mind, it's on the table. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In this space, in that space, in that place of decision, we have the power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. In every interaction, we have an opportunity to decide where we're going to be in that space and how we're going to come out of it. And I would say compassion and courage and communication is the place we should come in."
Well, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful workshop, and everyone will take away some very powerful messages. The one that resonates, I saw on chat, and for me, is that when I began practice years and years ago, it was all for my patients. And then Schwartz Center and people like you said, save some of that compassion for yourself. And now we're moving to the next level, that we have to save compassion and focus our compassion towards our colleagues. That there's the importance of supporting, that we have to have a relational, not patient-centered care, but human-centered care, because we're all in this together. And as you pointed out, the experience of the caregivers will drive the experience of the patients. It's not only the work we do, but how it feels doing that work. So thank you, Matthew, for this workshop. We appreciate your time today. And thank you to our audience. Keep an eye out for the recap of this week's sessions and an email which will contain a link on the for the CME post-test of today's session. And we would also, of course, like to thank our national business members for their year-round support of the Schwartz Center. This conference would not be possible without them. We look forward to having you all back again tomorrow for cultivating a culture of compassion, moving psychological safety from theory to practice. This is an interactive workshop. And we'd also like to remind all our Schwartz Center member hospitals and members that the deadline has been extended to June 30th to submit your program for consideration for the Common Impact Honors Award. Please check out our member site for more information. And lastly, we'd like to encourage all of you to download our event app and check out the Research and Innovation Showcase. You'll find a curated selection of interdisciplinary projects focused on our conference themes, such as leading with presence in healthcare and interdisciplinary course in compassion and leadership. We hope you enjoy learning from this wide array of work done by your colleagues in the healthcare industry. It has been a great pleasure for me to help moderate and learn from Matthew and from all of you. And I wish you all a very good day and stay safe and healthy in the upcoming week. Thank you all.